The Phantom Claim, California, 1849. The Sierra Nevada foothills pulsed with the fever of the gold rush, a siren call that drew men like Jacob Walsh, a former Boston clerk turned prospector. At 30, Jacob was wiry, his hands calloused from panning in icy streams. Deadman's Ravine, a jagged scar shunned by other diggers, was his latest haunt. Locals in the boomtown of Coloma whispered of miners who'd vanished there, their claims marked by strange runes carved into rocks. Jacob dismissed the tales, his eyes fixed on the promise of wealth. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Jacob's pan struck gold, a vein glittering in the ravine's shadowed depths, thicker than any he'd seen. He dug feverishly, unearthing nuggets that gleamed like cursed stars. But as twilight fell, the air thickened, and a low moan echoed through the pines. His lantern flickered, casting shadows that twisted into figures, miners in tattered coats, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow sockets. "Ours," a voice rasped, cold as the grave. Jacob's heart pounded, but the ravine was empty save for the wind. He fled to his camp, a canvas tent by the American River, but the shadows followed. That night, he dreamed of the miners, their bloodied hands clutching pickaxes, chanting, "Join the claim." Their leader, a skeletal figure with a scarred face, pointed to the vein, its gold pulsing like a heartbeat. Jacob awoke, his breath ragged, the runes from the ravine etched in his mind. Determined to prove it was a trick of exhaustion, he returned the next day, but the vein seemed alive, its glow unnatural. Each strike of his pickaxe brought whispers, "You steal." In Coloma, Jacob sought answers. The saloonkeeper, Amos, a grizzled man with a limp, shared a tale over whiskey. In 1847, a group of miners found the vein but turned on each other, driven mad by greed. Their leader, Silas, sealed a pact with a dark entity to guard the gold, sacrificing their souls. Their ghosts now haunted the ravine, claiming intruders. Amos showed Jacob a tattered map, marked with the runes, occult symbols of binding. "Leave it be," Amos warned, "or they'll take you." Jacob couldn't resist the gold's pull. He returned, digging deeper, but the whispers grew into screams. The ghostly miners appeared at dusk, their tools swinging, their eyes blazing. Jacob found a hidden cave behind the vein, its walls carved with more runes. Inside, he uncovered a journal, its pages brittle, detailing Silas's pact, blood spilled to bind the gold forever. As Jacob read, the cave shook, and Silas's ghost loomed, his voice booming, "Join us." Shadows coiled around Jacob, their touch icy. Desperate, Jacob chiseled the runes from the cave walls, hoping to break the curse. The ground roared, and the miners' screams filled the air. He smashed the vein with his pickaxe, gold dust exploding like ash. The ghosts dissolved, but the ravine collapsed, burying the vein. Jacob escaped, his hands empty, his mind scarred. Coloma's miners later found the ravine sealed, as if it never existed. Jacob left the goldfields, but the whispers followed, and some say he wandered the Sierras, muttering of a claim that still called his name. The Fever's Shadow, Klondike, 1898. The Yukon's frozen wilderness was a crucible of desperation, where men like Samuel Holt, a former schoolteacher from Seattle, chased gold through blizzards. At 35, Samuel was gaunt, his fingers blackened by frostbite, his mind consumed by gold fever. He'd panned the Klondike River for months, finding only flakes. One night, lost in a howling storm, a figure appeared, a tall, cloaked shadow with eyes like burning coals, beckoning toward a frozen cave. "Riches await," it whispered, its voice cutting through the wind. Samuel followed, his lantern dimming in the snow. The cave's entrance loomed, icicles like teeth. Inside, gold nuggets glittered on the walls, but the air was heavy, the cold unnatural. Shadows writhed, forming faces of starved prospectors, their mouths open in silent screams. The cloaked figure stood deeper in, its form shifting. "Take, but pay," it said. Samuel filled his pockets, ignoring the chill that seeped into his bones. That night, in his tent, he dreamed of the faces, clawing at him, their whispers accusing, "Greed binds you." He sought refuge in Dawson City, where the saloon buzzed with tales. A trapper, Eliza, shared a story of a demon that haunted the Klondike, luring prospectors to the cave with promises of gold, only to trap their souls. Samuel found a journal in a derelict cabin, written by a miner who'd seen the shadow in 1896. It described a pact. The demon granted wealth but claimed the greedy. Samuel's hands trembled as he read, the cave's gold now heavy in his pack. Returning to the cave, Samuel hoped to return the gold. The shadows were thicker now, the faces clearer, men and women, their eyes pleading. The demon appeared, its cloak dissolving to reveal a skeletal form. "You chose," it growled, as the cave's ice cracked. Samuel threw the gold at its feet, but the faces surged, pulling him into the walls. His screams echoed, then faded. Dawson's prospectors found Samuel's body at the cave's mouth, frozen, his pack empty. The cave was gone, swallowed by snow. But on stormy nights, travelers swear they see a shadow in the blizzard, its eyes glowing, offering gold to those who dare follow. The Cursed Nugget, Victoria, Australia, 1851. The goldfields near Ballarat were a chaotic sprawl of tents, picks, and desperate men, but Thomas Kerrigan, a former sailor from Liverpool, sought solitude along the Yarra River's muddy banks. At 42, his weathered face bore the scars of a life at sea, his hands steady despite years of hardship. He'd fled England after a mutiny gone wrong, chasing gold to bury his past. One dawn, while panning in a secluded bend, he unearthed a nugget the size of a man's fist, its surface etched with swirling patterns that pulsed under the sunlight. As he held it, the river stilled, the birds fell silent, and a voice whispered, sharp as a blade, "Return it." A figure materialized, an Aboriginal woman, Warunna, her eyes like polished coal, her form shimmering in the heat like a mirage. Her presence was both beautiful and terrifying, her voice carrying the weight of the land itself. "This is not yours," she said, her gaze piercing Thomas's soul. He clutched the nugget, dismissing her as a heat-induced vision, and hid it in his tent, a sagging canvas shelter among the eucalyptus trees. That night, sleep brought horrors. The river ran red with blood, miners choked on swirling dust, and Warunna's voice thundered, "Thief." Her hands clawed at his chest, her eyes burning with rage. Thomas awoke, drenched in sweat, the nugget heavy in his pack. He tried to ignore the dreams, but they grew vivid, Warunna standing by the river, her fingers trailing through the water, summoning visions of his own death. Drowning in mud, his screams unheard. In Ballarat, he sought answers from Mungala, an elder who tended a small camp outside the goldfields. Mungala's eyes narrowed as Thomas described the nugget. "Warunna guards the land's heart," he said. "Her gold is sacred, taking it curses you to madness." He spoke of miners who'd found similar nuggets, only to vanish or lose their minds, their claims swallowed by the earth. Thomas scoured Ballarat's makeshift library, a tent filled with tattered books and newspapers. He found records of prospectors driven mad in the 1840s, their journals mentioning a cursed gold, marked with runes. One described Warunna's wrath, rivers rising, winds howling, spirits tearing at the greedy. Thomas tried to sell the nugget, but buyers recoiled, claiming it burned their hands or whispered in their ears. He buried it under his tent, but the visions intensified. Warunna's form grew solid, her voice a scream that shook the trees. "Return it, or join the dust," she warned, her fingers leaving scratches on his arms. Desperate, Thomas sought Mungala again, begging for a way to break the curse. The elder instructed him to return the nugget to the river's deepest point, with an offering of respect, a song or prayer to the land. Thomas returned at dawn, the nugget heavier than ever. As he waded into the Yarra, Warunna appeared, her eyes blazing like twin suns. "Too late," she roared, as the river surged, its waters coiling around him like serpents. Thomas threw the nugget into the depths, chanting a clumsy prayer from his sailing days. The waters calmed, but Warunna's form lingered, her gaze softening. "You are spared," she whispered, fading into the mist. Thomas fled Ballarat, his dreams quieter but never silent. The Yarra's banks were empty, the nugget gone. Miners avoided that bend, claiming the river whispered warnings. Some say Warunna still watches, her gold waiting for the next fool to claim it, her voice a reminder that the land's heart is not for taking. The Ghostly Partner, Nevada, 1860. The Comstock lode was a fevered chaos of picks and greed, but Daniel Pike, a prospector in his early 30s, trusted no one. His face bore scars from bar fights, his heart hardened by betrayal in his youth. He worked alone, his camp a solitary fire in the desert's vast emptiness. One moonless night, a stranger approached, Ezra, gaunt and pale, his eyes like frost, his tattered coat smelling of dust and decay. "I know a mine," Ezra said, his voice low, richer than the lode. Daniel, worn by months of meager finds, agreed to partner, following Ezra to a hidden shaft deep in the sagebrush-covered hills. The mine was a labyrinth, its walls glittering with silver and gold ore, but the air was heavy, the silence oppressive. Ezra moved without sound, his shadow flickering without a light source. Daniel's lantern dimmed, and whispers echoed, "Stay." That night, in his tent, Daniel dreamed of a cave-in, miners trapped, their screams muffled, Ezra's face among them, his eyes accusing. He awoke, his hands trembling, the desert wind carrying faint cries. In Virginia City, Daniel scoured saloons for answers, finding a newspaper from 1855. It detailed a collapse that killed Ezra Holt and his crew, betrayed by a partner who stole their claim and fled with the gold. Daniel confronted Ezra at the mine's entrance, his voice shaking. "You're dead," he said. Ezra's eyes glowed, his smile cold. "You'll stay," he hissed, as the mine shook, rocks falling. Daniel ran deeper, hoping to escape, but found a chamber with bones scattered across the floor, their skulls marked with the same betrayal. Ezra's ghost appeared, his form towering. "Join us," he said, as the walls closed in. Daniel fought, clawing at the rubble, but the air grew thin, the whispers deafening. Rescuers found Daniel days later, half buried, babbling of a partner no one saw. The mine was sealed, its entrance lost to the desert. But miners whisper of Ezra, his pale eyes searching for new partners to share his tomb, the shaft's gold a lure for the doomed. The Devil's Paydirt, Colorado, 1875. The Rockies' jagged peaks cast long shadows over Cripple Creek, a frontier town where hope and desperation mingled in the dust. Caleb Morrow, a prospector in his late 40s, had chased gold for decades, his hands scarred from pickaxes, his eyes hollow from years of debt and loss. Once a farmer in Ohio, he'd lost his land to creditors and his family to fever, driving him west to bury his grief in the mountains. One dusk, while prospecting in a remote valley, he stumbled upon a claim unlike any other. The dirt glowed with strange red lights, pulsing like embers, yielding gold nuggets that seemed to hum with unnatural warmth. As Caleb dug, a voice rumbled, deep and guttural, shaking the earth. "Mine for me." A figure emerged from the twilight, tall, its silhouette twisted with horns, its eyes burning like twin furnaces. Its shadow swallowed the fading sunlight, and Caleb's breath caught, his lantern flickering. "Take the gold, but pay the price," the entity growled, its voice a mix of fire and gravel. Caleb laughed it off as a trick of exhaustion, his mind worn from weeks alone. He filled his pack with nuggets, their weight promising a new life. But as he returned to his camp, a lean-to of canvas and pine, the red lights followed, their glow seeping through the cracks in his shelter. That night, his dreams were a torment. He burned in a fiery pit, the entity's laughter echoing, its claws raking his soul. "You'll pay," it whispered, as flames consumed him. In Cripple Creek Saloon, Caleb sought solace among rough miners and whiskey. The barkeep, a grizzled woman named Hannah, overheard his muttering about the lights. "You've found the devil's pay dirt," she said, her voice low. She told of a prospector, Amos Reed, who vanished in 1860 after digging in that valley, babbling of a deal with a horned figure. Caleb scoffed but couldn't shake her words. He visited the town's boarded-up church, where he found a preacher's diary, its pages yellowed and brittle. The entries described a demon that claimed Cripple Creek's gold, luring miners with wealth but binding their souls to an eternal fire. "The valley is its altar," the preacher wrote, "and greed its offering." Caleb returned to the claim, driven by desperation and the gold's allure. The lights were brighter now, the ground warmer, as if alive. Each nugget he unearthed felt heavier, and the entity's presence grew stronger. Its form solidified nightly, cloven hooves, a charred cloak, its breath reeking of sulfur. "Serve me and live forever," it promised, its claws leaving burns on Caleb's arms. He confided in Hannah, who urged him to destroy the claim. Together, they searched the valley, finding a hidden cave behind the glowing dirt, its walls etched with runes that pulsed red. Inside, Caleb uncovered Amos's journal, detailing his pact with the demon, wealth for his soul, sealed with blood. The visions grew relentless. Caleb saw his family burning, their screams blending with the entity's laughter. He tried to flee, abandoning the gold, but the lights followed, flaring in the night. At the claim, the entity loomed, its form towering over the valley. "Pay," it roared, as the ground split, flames licking at Caleb's boots. He and Hannah fought back, dousing the cave with lamp oil and setting it ablaze. The runes glowed, then shattered, the entity's screams shaking the mountains. Caleb fled as the valley collapsed, a roar of fire and dust swallowing the claim. He survived, settling in Denver, but the red lights haunted his dreams, flickering at the edges of his vision. The valley was gone, marked only by scorched earth. Miners avoid Cripple Creek's hills, whispering of glowing dirt and a demon that waits for its next soul, its voice promising gold to those foolish enough to dig.